we always hear about after every terrorist attack, they were more powerful, they were using satellite phone, their communication was so high-end that we could not predict. Are we trying anything using our own technological advancements? Can something be done to counter the terrorism? Can it be put into practice?
See, the one thing is the space tools, whether the satellites or Earth observation system, etc., they can be put to use for various security needs, and that issues are being addressed by Defense Research Lab. But to give you an idea, the satellite communication is very powerful, and today there are many of our connectivity between the cities are through the satellites, and that's a reliable and secure mode of communication. But at the same time, the communicating with a handheld device, just like a mobile phone, etc., new technologies will have to be developed, and ISRO is in the process of developing these things, and few years from now that will be available. The Earth observation images, what we are having is very precise. We can identify even a vehicle moving on the road. But unfortunately, these satellites visit maybe once in 3 days or so over particular places. So continuous observation of the places from the space becomes difficult because of the large distance involved. If you want to have a continuous observation, it has to be from a geostationary platform. From there, if you look at it, this kind of 1 meter resolution, if you want to get, it becomes almost impossible. But still, in the long run, there can be huge telescopes attached to this camera, which can be used for looking at trouble spots and so on. So maybe in future days it will come. But today the type of devices what these terrorists use, etc., they are so tiny. It can be even put inside the shoes. So such monitoring for space is impossible. It has to be done only from locally.
Good afternoon, sir. Can you enlighten us with your ideas on the various projects that you have created during the role in ISRO? You have talked about Chandrayaan. Can you just talk about PSLV?
Well, I think ISRO was a very dynamic organization, and there's a large number of projects. If I had to even just list them, it will take next 1 hour. So, okay, you touched upon the right chord. The PSLV has been close to my heart all the years. In fact, I was the project director at the time to develop this multi-stage rocket system. And today PSLV has emerged as a world-class launcher, proving a very high level of reliability. In fact, PSLV itself was used for launching the Chandrayaan. But those days, that was in the 80s and early 90s, it was really a nightmare. No material, no chemicals, no electronic devices. Other than the sketches what you see in the newspaper or in the textbook, nothing was known to us. So our real great challenge was to really see that our scientists and engineers understand the basic science, the physics and chemistry behind the rocket system, and then develop them to a perfection by which you can attempt a launch. You have seen that sometimes launches do fail. That is not due to a design error. A small error in implementation by a technician or somebody can lead to a failure. So to see that how a foolproof system with a very high reliability can be realized was yet another challenge. So in the process what we have done is we have developed the world's one of the toughest steel. It is 5 times stronger than the conventional, we call the barraging steel. That is developed through the Midani in the country. Then the propellant chemicals which are required like the HTPB, ammonium perchlorate, fine powder of aluminium, all these have been developed in-house. Later it was transferred to the industries. Similarly, the chemical propellant, what is called a UDMH and N2O4, they had to be synthesized. Again, various types of aluminum alloys, titanium alloys, etc. Then the control devices like actuators, the electronics itself, we didn't have access to very sophisticated computers and so on. Using a very elementary form of integrated chips, we have made onboard computers those days. Those computers did the autopilot navigation guidance for the PSLV and so on. So it was really a thrilling area where every known technology, starting from chemistry to the advanced computer chips to the software, were attempted by a small group of people. And quite often we used to face very serious failures. But to learn from those failures and to turn it to a success and ultimately realize the PSLV will fly was one of the greatest challenges. Later, of course, the GSLV, it made use of number of modules from PSLV itself. And the cryogenic, the technology was expected from Russia, and we had a contract with them. But when the Russian USSR broke up, there were the problems and they were not able to supply the technology. We had to again embark on a series of new materials technology and fabrication technology to meet the challenges of a cryogenic engine that was qualified on the ground and so on. Of course, in the spacecraft we have the INSAT and IARA series and the ResourceSat series, the OceanSat series and so on. So these were some of the missions which we are able to successfully organize within ISRO.
Good afternoon, sir. Sir, my question is related to space elevators. Right now, many countries are thinking about jointly manufacturing. It's in the conceptual stage, but they are thinking about space elevators where you can use nano materials to create high tensile string towards space around 100 kilometers of length. And the applications include creating electricity 3 times the world's consumption if we fit that wire, that tensile string with solar panels. So how is India thinking forward about nanomaterials and its applications in space?
Well, I think this area we are not seriously addressed so far. First of all, nanotechnology is an emerging field and requires a multidisciplinary task. There are a few institutions in the country who are trying to develop the carbon tubes and so on. But to use this nanomaterial to realize a system, we have to go a long way. If you talk about a 100 kilometers long ladder-like structure, it calls for a tremendous amount of engineering. See, it's just not only making the structure, how to really stabilize it in space and make it stand there. Especially at least the first 10 kilometers it has to be well within the atmosphere. In the atmosphere, large kinds of disturbances, both due to the air currents and due to the electrostatics, magnetic field and so on comes into force. And even to characterize and then to make a model out of it is going to be a tremendous challenge. Yes, this is one of those dreams. In the 40s, Arthur Clarke envisioned that from a geostationary satellite we can communicate, but maybe after 20 years it becomes reality. Similarly, this also today is a dream. Maybe 30, 40 years from now it could be a possibility.
Good afternoon, sir. Could you please enlighten us on how far has India progressed in the fields of exomicrobiology?
Well, I think we have not directly embarked on it, but whereas one small science group under Professor Nalikar is not really using the space technology, but at the same time some of the balloons which are can float to something like 30 to 40 kilometers above the surface of the earth, and in that region they were trying to look for particles which would have come from outer space. In fact, one experiment was conducted and it gave some results which was indicative of certain microbes which are not present on the ground and which are present at an altitude of nearly 30 kilometers. At 30 kilometers, a very hostile environment in terms of temperature, vacuum and so on. So there was a serious opinion that these could be particles which have come from outer space. But there is no confirmation yet. We have to conduct a large number of experiments before we can converge on it. And similarly, to collect the microbes from the space and bring back also is going to be prohibitively expensive. And of course, one can bring a capsule back from the space, but to create an ideal situation where there is no contamination and there is no microbes from the ground being carried out there and so on, that requires a lot of planning. There are not many groups who are working on it. Unless there are some scientists with interest come forward, such experiments become difficult to organize.
So I have a small question. See, we have directly satellite communications to the DTH, right? So how does this DTH directly communicate, how does it communicate back? Do they have powerful transmitters which directly communicate to the satellite, or are there local stations?
No, actually what is being done is the DTH stations are with a controlled antenna and servo systems and so on. So they are able to beam the signal up to the satellite, and satellite folds back and send it down to the ground. And the upward link from our DTH, this thing is very weak. It can only give you an identity, or maybe once you send a command for viewing a video or things like that. So a few kilobits per second only it can transmit back. It is a mostly one-way communication.
Good afternoon, sir. My question is, our country India has satellites like INSAT, which is providing services in tele-education, telemedicine and so on. So since we have satellites like this, why weren't we able to save the lives of the people in the worst attacks of tsunami that hit India in 2004?
Well, first of all, we were caught unawares, so to say, because India has not seen a tsunami for almost 90 years or so. The second thing is the signature of the tsunami is not something which we can detect from the space. One is, of course, that severe earthquake which happens on the ground. There are only ground monitors which can do that. The second thing is the tsunami wave propagation is over the ocean, and it is in the form of very small amplitude waves with long periodicity. So it just rides on the sea, and you cannot make out from the space. Hardly 20 centimeters will be the height of such waves. So the only way is to go for some sensors underneath the ocean, and from there the small pressure fluctuation and the low frequency component can be identified and so on. Since India did not face tsunamis in the past, we not really concentrate on a comprehensive instrumentation to detect this. But now after that event, there has been, the Ocean Development Department has put in place number of buoys as well as the underwater sensors which can detect this such waves and can give warning in advance. And they also interact with other global community for sharing the data on earthquake and so on. If you recall the last few occasions where Indonesia had some severe earthquakes, the warnings were issued to our coastal lines about 5-6 hours in advance. So the system is slowly emerging, and soon we will have a powerful system for tsunami warnings as well.
Good evening, sir. Sir, I would like to ask a question about extraterrestrial life outside Earth. Sir, is the ISRO working on a particular topic, like SETI, Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence? They are also working on this life outside Earth. So, are you a person who believes there is life outside Earth? Can you please speak on that?
Well, I think our scientific community is not very much enthused by this extraterrestrial life and their investigation. There are some study groups all over the world that are looking at it. But personally, if you ask me, it may be there, but not within our reach. For the simple reason, there are not many planet-like objects near Earth which can sustain life forms. So that way the presence of extraterrestrial life it may be there, but they may not be able to establish communication with us. The nearest is a few tens of light years away, and even if they travel at the speed of light, it is difficult to reach in reasonable time. Then the next point is with respect to if there is an intelligence, they also may have a communication system. They may be using the electromagnetic spectrum and so on. So there are powerful antennas, especially in US and Australia currently. They are tuned to look for any sensible signal which is coming from outside. So that can be indicative of any intelligence outside the planet Earth. But so far, I don't think there is any such evidence has been caught, and people are still looking for. We also send out some coded digital signals to the outside world, so that if anybody else receives, they can respond to us and so on. But it's not successful, and we have to go a long way.
Thank you, sir.
Good afternoon, sir. This is Sankeet here from Department of Management. Sir, there are some images shown by satellite where they show humongous pores on the moon. How are these pores formed? And my second question is, in a hypothetical situation, suppose an asteroid is colliding with Earth, what are the measures taken?
Well, one thing is, as far as the moon is concerned, during its formative years, there could be some gas-producing components in the core, and that would have been left off, and that would have left to these cave-like structures. There were a few structures which is spotted even in our images. But the second point with respect to no, can you repeat the question? I missed the point. Can you repeat the second part of the question?
The second question.
Yeah, okay. Well, regarding the collision is concerned, it can be disastrous if even a few kilometer diameter object which comes and hits planet Earth, it can devastate the whole human civilization. In fact, you know that maybe about a few million years back, such an event took place, and that is the one which wiped out the entire dinosaurs and other things from the African continent. But as far as we are concerned, today practically we can do nothing except monitor. But fortunately, there is no object which is near Earth, which is having a path, a colliding path with Earth, which can happen in the next 70 to 100 years. So that much guarantee you have. In your lifespan, it will not happen. Okay? But one has to. But perhaps some scientists are thinking of even developing a huge rocket system which can intercept and blast it off and so on. Maybe, yes, such preparedness may be called for if we had to protect the planet Earth.
Good afternoon, sir. So my question is, how are we using the space technology for the development of the countries which does not have any advancement in this field, like countries from like Afro-Asians, since your topic is for societal development, right?
Yes, actually, you know that especially the countries in Africa and South America, they very badly need the use of such technologies. The Brazil, Chile, etc., we have already cooperative agreements to transfer some of these technologies for their use. Even in the African countries, we have made available this telemedicine program and so on. One of our major hospitals, like Apollo Hospital in Chennai, is providing such services to some of the African countries and so on. So, but of course, the basic technology is available, but the resources which is required for spreading has to be taken up by other countries. But some time back, our government has given some soft loan to the African countries so that the space technology can be put to use in various application fields.
Good afternoon, sir. You have done a wonderful presentation. My question is, what is the purpose of International Space Station?
Well, I think there was a lot of expectations when people conceived this. It's actually a platform which is above the atmosphere, which is circling with a lot of amenities, so scientists can go, live there, conduct experiments with respect to the planetary exploration or to the galaxies and stars and so on. And again, there was a lot of hype with respect to materials being processed under microgravity, which will have better properties, which will be made use of for medical purposes or high strength application and so on. But unfortunately, these applications have not caught up to the extent what they expected. The net result is, I would say, the $115 billion what they have spent on the space station is virtually becoming a waste. My personal opinion, okay.
Good afternoon, sir. Sir, I'm Deepa from the Department of Management Studies, and I would like to know that when you say that satellite technologies can be made use in the field of fisheries and agriculture, how effectively is such high-end technology helping out an illiterate farmer or a fisherman?
Well, I think this is where I think India has really shown an example. The satellite technology is building a satellite with certain capability to monitor the sea surface temperature, the ocean color, the winds over the water and so on. So with all this has to be synthesized, and then we had to have some controlled experiments to identify the potential areas where the fish can come. So this, once we do that, the remaining becomes operational data. The fisherman doesn't have to worry about any of these parameters. He gets in the signboard in a village saying that on such and such locations, they will say that northeast you travel by 20 kilometers, you will reach the spot. So that information is disseminated, and I think every alternate day this information is put on the signboards in the villages, so the villages directly get this data. The second, again regarding the agriculture, the day-to-day affairs of the agriculture is not controlled by this. But he may get a warning as to a drought if it is setting in, or if there's a flood condition which is coming in. And again, suppose some the pest attack is there and so on. So through the agricultural colleges and the block development office, etc., this information is made available to the villagers, and they can make corrective action based on that. Most important part is to give a survey of the agricultural land and what is the type of land utilization we can effectively do. All land may not be suitable for wheat and rice. Some may be more for potato or groundnut and so on. Some may be for sugarcane. So this type of information, once you derive from space, it can be put to use for a better planning of agriculture. The effectiveness is seen here in Gujarat coast and Kerala coast, Andhra Pradesh coast, etc. The fishermen have reported 60 to 100% improvement in the catch. And some people have reported over a year something like ₹1,00,000 per boat as a saving in fuel itself. In normal case, one has to search around and then go to the fishing spot. Agriculture, many places, this type of information has helped in improving the yield by 100% in some cases as well.
Good afternoon, sir. Recently in the newspaper there was a report that space is full of debris. And even Indian missions will add to that problem, and will it lead to any calamity?
Yes, I think it is a very, very difficult situation. In fact, 3 years back, when of course we don't have a direct monitoring, the US state, there is a tracking network which produces the results of the objects which are in space. They have catalogued objects around 9,000 pieces about 3 years back, and that itself was potential hazard. When we launch a satellite, we have to make we are not crossing the path.